Pit stop! If you've seen Cars, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That scene, Lightning McQueen skids into the pits, the crew scrambles, and then Guido, the tiny Italian pit mechanic, steps up. Bzzz, wheels off, wheels on, done! Fastest pit stop in the history of anything. Even the commentators are in shock.
That was the fastest pit stop I've ever seen.
Now, here's the thing. That moment, it actually wasn't that exaggerated, because in real life, Formula 1 pit stops happen so fast you could blink and miss it. The record? 1.8 seconds. 1.8! That's 4 tires change even before your brain even processes what just happened. It's all thanks to a tiny but game-changing detail. F1 cars don't have 5 lug nuts per wheel. They only have 1. Yeah, just one single locking nut per wheel. Meanwhile, your regular car has, what, 5? Maybe 6. NASCAR cars, same deal until recently, so why? How does this one lonely nut hold up when an F1 car is blasting through corners at 200 miles per hour, slamming the brakes from 350 kilometers per hour to a dead stop, pulling 5-6 Gs of force like a fighter jet? Shouldn't more bolts mean more security? And most importantly, what happens when this one nut goes wrong? Well, let's just say Valtteri Bottas still has nightmares about it. So, why one nut? Well, it all comes down to time. The difference between winning and losing a race in F1 isn't just about raw speed, it's about every single second in the pit lane. But it wasn't always this way. Back in the early days of Formula 1, pit stops weren't even a thing. Races were often run start to finish without tire changes because the tires were built to last an entire Grand Prix. Refueling was allowed, but even that was a slow, calculated process. Pit stops could take, well, over 30 seconds. Back then, stopping in the pits was seen as a last resort, not a strategic move. Fast forward to the late 1970s and early 1980s, and things started to change. Tires became softer and grippier, but they also wore out faster. That meant that suddenly, pit stops weren't just about fixing a problem, they became a tool for winning races. Teams realized that fresh tires meant better lap times, and if you could swap them quickly enough, the time lost in the pits could be made up on track. But here's the problem. Early pit stops were slow as hell. Teams used standard wheel nuts, just like a normal road car. That meant each wheel had 3 or 4 individual nuts that had to be unscrewed manually, and then tightened again once the new wheel was on. Some teams even used traditional hand-powered wrenches before air guns were introduced. Imagine that! A driver pulls in, the mechanics rush in, and they're sitting there, one guy per wheel, physically unscrewing multiple nuts one by one, swapping the wheel, then screwing them back in. Pit stops were often 15 to 20 seconds long, sometimes even more, and if a mechanic fumbled a lug nut, say goodbye to your race. The evolution of pit stops was all about making this process faster and smoother. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, teams started experimenting with pneumatic wheel guns, which sped up the process of removing and attaching nuts. But the real game changer came when F1 teams ditched multiple lug nuts entirely in favor of a single central locking nut. This change happened gradually, but by the mid-1990s, every team had switched. The logic was simple: one nut, one gun, one move, and the wheel is off. And the wheel guns had to be precise to the millimeter to avoid cross-threading, which, as we'll see later, is where things go very, very wrong. The result? Pit stops went from 10 to 15 seconds down to just 4 or 5 seconds. And with every team now optimizing for speed, we saw an arms race in the pit lane. By the early 2010s, teams were pushing the boundaries even further. Suddenly, 3-second pit stops became the norm, and then came Red Bull in 2019. They shattered the world record with a 1.82-second pit stop in Brazil. Think about that. In less time than it takes you to open a soda can, 4 wheels were removed and replaced, and the car was launched back onto the track. And that's why the one-nut system isn't just about speed, it's about survival. Imagine if an F1 car still had 5 individual lug nuts per wheel, like a regular road car. That's 20 separate nuts that need to be unscrewed and put back on during a stop. You think a 2-second pit stop is impressive now? With a traditional setup, you'd be lucky to get it done in 15 seconds. That's basically a retirement sentence in an F1 race. But hold on, if one nut is so efficient, why doesn't every car in the world use it? Well, here's where things get interesting. See, road cars don't need 2-second pit stops. What they need is security and simplicity. A 5-nut setup spreads the force across multiple points, making it less likely that a single mistake leads to disaster. If one nut is loose, you'll still got 4 keeping the wheel in place. In F1, there's no safety net. That one nut is holding everything together, and if something goes wrong, yeah, you're in trouble. But don't think this is just some regular bolt. This thing is a precision-engineered monster. Massive, conical in design, made from titanium or high-strength aluminum, and torqued down with over 500 pound-foot of force. That's more than double what most road cars require. It's built to withstand brutal acceleration, high-speed impacts, and over 5 Gs of force in the corners. Once it's locked in place, it's not coming off unless the gun removes it. And here's the kicker. These nuts aren't cheap. A single F1 wheel nut can cost thousands of dollars. That's right. One nut, the price of an entire set of road tires. And teams don't just use one per car, they burn through them every race. The pit guns themselves, those high-torque air guns, tens of thousands of dollars per unit. So yeah, you're not seeing this system in your Toyota anytime soon. Now, let's talk about what happens when things don't go as planned, which, to be fair, is extremely rare in modern F1. The one-nut system has been perfected over decades, and failures almost never happen. But when they do, they can be absolute nightmares. Monaco 2021. Valtteri Bottas pulls into the pits, ready for a routine tire change. The crew is locked in. The gun hits the nut, spins at blinding speed, and then nothing. The wheel doesn't come off. The gun tries again. Nothing. The nut won't budge because it's been over-tightened to the point of destruction. The immense torque from the pit gun, combined with a fraction of a second misalignment, meant that instead of simply loosening, the nut's metal sheared off and fused itself to the axle. Basically, the gun had machined the nut down so much that there was nothing left to grip. It was likely trying to unscrew a completely smooth bolt. There was no way to grab it, no way to twist it off. The wheel was now part of the car. Bottas race? Done! He couldn't even go back out on old tires. His car was literally stuck in the pit box. And just to make things worse, Mercedes couldn't even fix it after the race. The car had to be shipped back to the factory, nut, wheel and all, just so they can cut the thing off. It was the most Monaco thing ever. But here's the thing. This almost never happens. These wheel nuts are built to withstand insane levels of force, and the pit crew has practiced thousands of times to get the process right. The Bottas incident? It was a freak occurrence caused by a perfect storm of extreme torque and a slightly misaligned pit gun. So yeah, when the one-nut system works, it's lightning fast, and 99.9% of the time, it works flawlessly. But when it fails hard. Now, let's compare this to other racing series because not every motorsport follows F1's approach to wheel nuts. Le Mans and endurance racing has been using a single locking nut for years, but unlike F1, the priority isn't just speed, it's reliability. In a 24-hour race like Le Mans, wheel nuts must endure extreme stress for hours. Teams often double or triple stint their tires, meaning the nut stays in place for hundreds of miles before being removed. Pit stops last longer, around 10 to 15 seconds because precision matters more than shaving off milliseconds. The nut design focuses on longevity rather than sheer speed. NASCAR, until 2022, stuck with a traditional 5-lug nut system, prioritizing security over pit stop speed. Pit crews manually hammered in each nut in just seconds, but this led to loose wheels and strategic risks, like intentionally skipping the last nut for quicker stops. When NASCAR introduced the next-gen cars, they switched to a single locking nut, mirroring F1 and endurance racing. It wasn't just about speed, it was necessary for their new wheel and suspension design. IndyCar has always used a single locking nut, but their approach is slightly different. Without F1's extreme aerodynamic needs, IndyCar nuts are built for fast changes with more forgiving tolerances. Since IndyCar pit stops also include refueling, they last longer, typically 5 to 10 seconds, so the nut system doesn't need the absolute precision of F1. Formula 2 and Formula 3 also use a single locking nut, following F1's lead for standardization and cost control. Keeping the system consistent across the Junior Series ensures a smoother transition for drivers and teams moving up. So, next time you watch an F1 pit stop, take a second to appreciate what's really happening. In less than 2 seconds, 4 wheels come off, 4 go back on, and the only thing keeping them in place is a single precision-engineered nut. It's an insane balance of speed, engineering, and human execution. Flawless when it works, brutal when it doesn't. And if you're in your driveway wrestling 5 lug nuts to change a tire, just be glad that if one of them gets stuck, you don't need a factory team, a high-powered airgun, and a private jet back to headquarters just to get it off. If you enjoyed the deep dive into F1 tech, hit the like button, subscribe for more, and drop a comment below. Is the one-nut system the pinnacle of motorsport efficiency, or do you think it's a disaster waiting to happen? Let's talk about it.